From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lead. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on June 20th, 2025 from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. On this episode of The Lead, we bring you part 2 of our 10-year commemoration of the Mother Emanuel AME Church shooting. Our first episode focused on reflections from South Carolinians who participated in our Voices Collected initiative, as well as from folks who participated in the Charleston Forum on where we go from here. This episode will also feature stories from our Voices Collected initiative, but will focus on the downing of the Confederate flag, legislative issues like hate crimes and gun reforms that have stalled in the state, and more. And also a programming note, we will be off next week in observance of Gavin taking a family vacation week. We'll have a fresh...
Sorry.
Do you want it?
Hi, everyone.
We're in the same studio today. We're trying out different concepts now. But we'll have a fresh pod for you on July 1st, in which we'll have at least one declared gubernatorial candidate to talk about. Stay tuned. But also, folks, we'll have our wind down section back then, too. So please give us a shout, 803-563-7169, so we have someone to talk to in the wind down section. We look forward to hearing from y'all. Maybe you're at our live taping in Aiken. You want to talk about that or any number of things. We're always here for you, 803-563-7169.
Thank you.
And thank you. See, you hear him? You get to hear him in the background. This is typically for our Patreon members. Now, I want to start off by saying that this is an adaptation of the piece I put together for This Week in South Carolina, which you can watch on youtube.com/South Carolina ETV. And there's a lot of our Voices Collected initiative videos there too, as well as that special that we put together this past week. And just a heads up for this episode, it is full of a lot of triggering memories and situations. I can tell you I've been crying a lot over the past 2 weeks, and so have many people I've interviewed, as this event is still very fresh for so many people. So just a little bit of a heads up for you. 10 years ago this week, South Carolina witnessed one of the most heinous, racially motivated attacks in modern history when a white supremacist murdered 9 black parishioners at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. The horrific event laid bare memories of the worst moments of our state's past, with a modern-day radicalization that led to fear, but also unity. This is one of the survivors, Polly Shepard, on the phone with 911 dispatch the night of June 17th, 2015.
Please answer.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
Please, Emanuel Church, there's plenty of people shot down here. Please send somebody right away.
Emanuel Church?
Emanuel AME 110 Calhoun.
And there's people shot?
Yeah, he shot the pastor. He shot all the men in the church. Please come right away.
Okay, my partner's going to be getting some help on the way while I get a little bit more information from you, okay? Stay on the line with me. Are you safe?
He's still in here, I'm afraid. He's still in here.
The murderer, Dylan Roof, sat with the parishioners and prayed with them during Wednesday night Bible study for an hour before they bowed their heads and he opened fire using a .45 caliber Glock that he legally purchased despite a criminal record that should have prevented him. Don Lundy is the former head of the Charleston County EMS, and he responded to the mass casualty page that he received at home that evening.
In a mass casualty, there's lots of radio traffic as people are positioning themselves. First unit is on scene. Everybody kind of calms down for a minute and waits for them to come back and confirm or say, never mind. I got halfway there, and I realized nobody said a word since that first unit was there. And I remember crossing Sam Rittenberg and saying, that's not a good sign. When I pulled up, the crews had already set up the mass casualty program that we have. They have a patient collection point right in the middle of the intersection. Meeting in Calhoun was shut down. And of course, the 2 bigger surgical suites are 10 blocks down the street. So I think, well, if we're going to do this, this is a decent logistical place to have this happen. And as I went behind the crime scene tape, the first crew that was there was bringing out the one patient that we took to the hospital. And I just briefly saw the wound and knew that, it'd be a miracle if that patient came through.
Ava Ayers was with her family in Virginia, and she was relaxing after a long day at school when she noticed her parents getting worked up over something on TV. She found out that her grandfather, Reverend Daniel Simmons Sr., had been shot. The same man, Don Lundy, said it would be a miracle if he made it.
We have every TV on at the house. My dad is on the phone, and I'm like, what is happening? And then we see my grandfather kind of glimpse past on a gurney. And I'm like, that looks like Granddaddy. And my dad was like, it was a shooting. I'm like, a shooting where? He's like, at Bible study. I'm like, we're home. What Bible study? He said, in Charleston. I'm like, is that Granddad? And he's like, yeah. And so I think I just stood there. Because at that point, my dad's walking out the door. So then it's just my mom and I, and I'm like, we have to get ready to go, don't we? And she's like, yeah, this is big. And I'm like, yeah, if it's on the news here, this isn't a random shooting. This is something big. And that just kind of brings us to where we are today. Things are just now starting to unblur themselves, and I'm just now starting to get a grip on this was a targeted crime. It was something that was hate-fueled. It was something that had an end goal in mind, and we are doing our best to stop that.
Roof was apprehended in North Carolina the following morning, extradited, and on June 19th, he was charged with 9 counts of murder. During the arraignment hearing, several victims' family members forgave him, a powerful moment that not all victims' family members were able to do. The state mourned the loss of those 9 souls senselessly murdered by someone hoping to start a race war, but it had the opposite effect. State Senator Clementa Pinckney was the pastor of the church, and he laid in state in the lobby of the State House after his body was brought in by caisson to a Capitol building where the Confederate flag had flown on the grounds since 1961, but wouldn't for much longer. The national tragedy brought President Barack Obama to Charleston to eulogize Senator Pinckney, grieve with the survivors, victims' families, friends, and give hope, as well as sing a few notes of Amazing Grace.
Clementa Pinckney found that grace. Cynthia Hurd found that grace. Susie Jackson found that grace. Ethel Lance found that grace. The Payne Middleton doctor found that grace. Tywanza Sanders found that grace. Daniel L. Simmons Sr. found that grace. Sharonda Coleman Singleton found that grace. Myra Thompson found that grace. Through the example of their lives, they've now passed it on to us. May we find ourselves worthy of that precious and extraordinary gift as long as our lives endure. May grace now lead them home.
The first few months of 2015 were tumultuous for South Carolina. 2 months before, in April, North Charleston police officer Michael Slager shot and killed Walter Scott, an unarmed black man who fled Slager's custody after being arrested for a traffic stop. Slager shot Scott in the back several times as he ran away from him, saying he feared for his life. The incident, like many, was caught on film, and the legislature soon passed the first body camera law in the nation. But then the Mother Emanuel AME Church shooting happened, and the city and state were once again tested. Forgiveness, unity, and grace were words commonly associated with the tragedy. But forgiveness is hard to come by for some. For others, it's part of their faith. But even folks like Karen Wright Chisholm, a longtime friend of Myra Thompson, it's not that easy.
But as I have grown in my faith walk, I've grown and matured to know that God forgave us for all the things that we did. So we, as Christians and as people, must know that we have to forgive others for things that they did, because it's not up to us to be the judge of what people do, but we got to understand. But it's hard, but we know that it's fair.
And Ava Ayers has this perspective.
Forgiveness is a choice, and I chose forgiveness because it is something that I believe in. But forgiveness doesn't mean proximity to me, and it does not necessarily mean that I forgot what you did and that I forgot the motive. I forgive the action, but I'm still very aware of what the true intention was. And that is what I fight against. That is what I use my resilience for. That is what I persist against, is making sure that your motive is not the story and that your motive is not the legacy.
Then State Senator Vincent Shaheen was close friends with Senator Pinckney and sat next to him in the Senate chambers. Forgiveness isn't for him to decide, he said, but the horrific tragedy presented an opportunity.
Yeah, unity is fleeting, and I think that was true here, and it was why it was so important to capitalize on that unity to remove the flag. Clem's funeral was a part of that process. Clem's funeral not only was an opportunity to mourn and come together and think about what really matters, which I think all of the senators really did in a profound way, but it was also an important symbolic moment that led to the Confederate flag being removed, because his funeral came before that vote. And it was mighty hard to go to that funeral where a racist killer had murdered your friend for any of us, and then think it was okay for the state of South Carolina to fly the Confederate flag in front of the State House grounds. So it was a profound moment of unity and opportunity for people to come together and also personally to mourn, but it was also a political event. A political event that led to the flag being removed from the State House grounds.
His Republican rival, then Governor Nikki Haley, whom he ran against in 2010 and 2014, held a press conference in the State House lobby 5 days after the shooting to call for the Confederate battle flag to be removed from the State House grounds. She was flanked by Congressman Jim Clyburn and Senator Tim Scott, the only two black members of the state's congressional delegation, as well as Democratic and Republican lawmakers and former governors.
We have stared evil in the eye and watched good, prayerful people killed in one of the most sacred of places. We were hurt and broken, and we needed to heal. We were able to start that process, not by talking about issues that divide us, but by holding vigils, by hugging our neighbors, by honoring those we lost, and by falling to our knees in prayer. Our state is grieving, but we are also coming together. The hate-filled murderer who massacred our brothers and sisters in Charleston has a sick and twisted view of the flag. In no way does he reflect the people in our state who respect and in many ways revere it. We respect freedom of expression, and that for those who wish to show their respect for the flag on their private property, no one will stand in your way. But the State House is different. And the events of this past week call upon us to look at this in a different way. 15 years ago, after much contentious debate, South Carolina came together in a bipartisan way to move the flag from atop the Capitol dome. Today, we are here in a moment of unity in our state, without ill will, to say it's time to move the flag from the Capitol grounds.
President Obama spoke of Haley's eloquence and the importance of removing the flag during Pinckney's funeral 4 days later on June 26.
It's true a flag did not cause these murders. But as people from all walks of life, Republicans and Democrats, now acknowledge, including Governor Haley, whose recent eloquence on the subject is worthy of praise, that flag was a reminder of systemic oppression and racial subjugation. We see that now. Removing the flag from this state's capital would not be an act of political correctness. It would not be an insult to the valor of Confederate soldiers. It would simply be an acknowledgement that the cause for which they fought, the cause of slavery, was wrong.
While the grieving continued, the pressure in front of the cameras and behind the scenes was growing as Democrats and others laid plans to remove the Confederate battle flag from outside of the State House, where it had been flying since a 2000 compromise took it off of the Capitol dome. That compromise, known as the Heritage Act, requires a 2/3 vote in both chambers to remove or alter any monument on public grounds in the state, a heavy challenge in the Republican-controlled legislature. With Rufe's affinity for the flag, its divisive past, and its rebirth in the present, the moment was at hand, led by Senator Pinckney's friend, Senator Shaheen. And you'll hear his recent comments and then part of a floor speech he gave in the Senate.
He actually was a little difficult to get to know. Clem was a quiet guy. He was gentle. He was very kind, but he didn't open up really quickly or easily. But we served together for, well over a decade, and I ended up being seatmates with Clem. All of us, I think, wanted to just shut down and mourn Clem. We didn't want to be in the Senate. We didn't want to really do anything except for cry and mourn and try to figure out a way to comfort Jennifer, his wife, and the family. I had, the year before, run for governor, and taking down the Confederate flag had been a key issue in my campaign. Bakari Sellers and I had made it a core issue in the latter part of the campaign. And as we learned about the racist nature of the shooting, which I think we all suspected from the very beginning, but then we saw the Confederate flags on the license plates. And that next day, which I think was a Thursday, we had to start thinking, okay, what does this mean? And a part of me just wanted to shut it all away and say, I don't want to deal with any of this. But by Friday, I think it began to be clear that the public understood that racist actions and racist thought and racist publications and internet screeds, that they had real results, and this was a real result of it. If that flag was ever going to come down, it was going to be now, and it's terrible and sad and awful that it took Clem Pinckney being killed for that to happen, but that is the only way it was going to come down, and I knew Clem, and I knew that that's what he would want. I introduced this bill, and am proud to have introduced it with so many co-sponsors, not because our friend was assassinated not too many days ago. And we should pass this bill not because of that or because of the 8 members of his congregation who were murdered. And we shouldn't pass this bill because some national figures say so, or because we've been getting emails or pressure one way or the other. I am asking you to pass this bill as it stands today, not with the amendment, for a very simple reason, and it's because it's the right thing to do.
The Senate voted 36-3 on July 7th, sending the clean bill to the House, where multiple amendments were proposed and debate was drawn out for 13 hours. This led to behind-the-scenes pressure from Governor Haley with the GOP caucus, Shaheen working folks, as well as impassioned stories of racism and patriotism by Democrats and Republicans on the floor. But as the hours trudged on and there were attempts to keep amending the bill by having either the flagpole stay up or flying a different flag or any number of different ways around this, Dorchester Republican Representative Jenny Horn was fed up with her colleagues and made a passionate, fiery speech that spurred the 94-20 vote.
I cannot believe that we do not have the heart in this body to do something meaningful, such as take a symbol of hate off these grounds on Friday. And if any of you vote to amend, you are ensuring that this flag will fly beyond Friday. And for the widow of Senator Pinckney and his 2 young daughters, that would be adding insult to injury. And I will not be a part of it. And for all of these reasons, I will not vote to amend this bill today. We may visit this another session, another year. But if we amend this bill, we are telling the people of Charleston, we don't care about you. We do not care that someone used this symbol of hate to slay 8 innocent people who are worshiping their God. I'm sorry, I have heard enough about heritage. I have a heritage. I am a lifelong South Carolinian. I am a descendant of Jefferson Davis, okay? But that does not matter. It's not about Jenny Horn. It's about the people of South Carolina who have demanded that this symbol of hate come off of the State House grounds.
Governor Nikki Haley signed the bill with former governors Dick Riley, Jim Hodges, and David Beasley standing behind her, as well as some of the victims' family members. On July 10th, with thousands of people gathered outside the State House and Haley and other lawmakers watching from the steps, a state highway patrol honor guard marched toward the flag near the Confederate Soldiers Memorial and brought it down after it flew on the grounds for more than 50 years. The crowd roared. I was there that day, several stories up high in that BB&T building across the street, photographing the scene, and I will say that roar was something I had never heard before. But Senator Shaheen wasn't there.
On the day the Confederate flag was removed, I didn't go to the State House. I didn't think it was a great day. I thought it was a shameful day. And I stayed at home, and I was glad that it came down. I was sad that it took the murder of my friend for the flag to come down. But he is now a symbol, and he did become a symbol of the state and the tragedy of the state, but also the opportunity of the state. And his portrait now hanging in the Senate chamber, his line in state at the State House is part of the history and an important part of the history. And I hope it's a turning point in the history that when we look back 50 years from now, we'll see that we moved closer together racially, closer together as a people because of it.
Following the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, there were additional protests outside the State House and renewed calls for police reforms, as well as calls for gun reforms and a hate crimes law, the latter of which have been blocked by Republicans in the Senate for years. There was also renewed debate over monuments, especially some of the controversial ones on State House grounds and around the state involving the Confederacy. This included former Vice President John C. Calhoun, one of the most prominent and divisive figures in our state. But again, the Heritage Act prevented action on these, except the 110-foot-tall Calhoun statue that towered over Marion Square in downtown Charleston. Paperwork shows that the statue was given to the city, so on the 5-year anniversary of the Mother Emanuel shooting, Charleston City Council voted unanimously to remove the statue that had been there for 124 years, something that took 17 hours to do. Something that I can also attest to, as me, AP reporter Meg Kennard, and South Carolina Public Radio reporter Victoria Hansen spent that entire day and night in the park in June 2020. Now, over the years, Mother Emanuel has been the backdrop of prominent politicians speaking on hate crimes and gun reforms, including New Jersey Senator Cory Booker during the 2020 presidential campaign and President Joe Biden in January 2024, where he spoke of the courage of the community.
The word of God was pierced by bullets and hate, of rage, propelled by not just gunpowder, but by a poison. Poison that has for too long haunted this nation. And what is that poison? White supremacy. Oh, it is. It's a poison. Throughout our history, it's ripped this nation apart. This has no place in America. Not today, tomorrow, or ever. From that day, this nation saw this congregation, this community, demonstrate one of the greatest acts of strength I have ever seen. I mean it sincerely from the bottom of the act of forgiveness, the act of grace. It was as President Obama sang from here, Amazing Grace. You changed hearts. You did something that may not have happened but for your courage. You brought down the Confederate flag in South Carolina. You brought it down. No, you did. And you helped the nation heal.
But pleas for a penalty enhancement law for hate crimes or expanding background checks have stalled over the years, even when survivor Polly Shepard testified before a Senate subcommittee in 2023.
Susie Jackson, the oldest member in there, had 11 bullets in her when he finished shooting. There were 77 bullets in the room. Every person in there had at least 7 or 8 bullets in them when he finished. Gavin Pinckney had the less because he shot him first. So I don't think anyone should have to go through that. And we're living around, I think last I checked, 84 militia groups, hate groups in South Carolina. We need a law that will address all these issues. We should never have to go to church and go through what we went through. Dylan talked to me specifically. He told me, shut up. He asked me, did I shoot you? And I said, no. He said, I'm not going to. I'm going to leave you here to tell the story. I knew where you were all the time. I could hear you praying. But Tawanza took the attention off of us. And I think that's why we're living today. I think if we had a better law, it wouldn't allow these people to do the things they do.
Such a bill had passed the House multiple times just to stall in the Senate. This year, House members didn't even pass one to the Senate. We asked Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey about why it always dies at the end of the session this past year.
I mean, if you look on the calendar, I've never been the guy objecting to it. Now, I don't like it, but I've never been the guy objecting to it. Look, the reality is, and I understand they want to put everything on me, and that's fine. I'm happy to be the bad guy. But the reality is that bill does not have sufficient support within our caucus to bring it up. If it did, it would have already come up. If I were the only one objecting to it, it would have come up. I'm not objecting to it. But it does not, despite what they think, it does not have sufficient support to come up. If it did, it would have come up.
South Carolina is one of 2 states without a hate crimes law, though several cities have passed them. The state relies on the federal government to prosecute such matters, as it did in 2016 with Roof, who was convicted of 9 counts of using a firearm to commit murder, 12 hate crimes charges, and 12 counts under another hate crime statute that prohibits using force to obstruct a person's right to worship. He also pled guilty to 9 counts of murder at the state level in 2017, and he is on federal death row. South Carolina's gun laws have become looser since 2015, with permitless carry now being the law of the land. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly and his wife, former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived a 2011 assassination attempt, were in Charleston on Wednesday.
You know, Gabby talks about this a lot, like the one thing we can do to improve our gun laws is with the
background check.
With the background check system. And in this case, in Charleston, a decade ago, the shooter in this case went to buy a firearm. And the required, or the 3 days under the current law had passed. And under federal law, if 3 business days expire, the person's allowed to buy a gun, even if the background check hasn't come back to the seller of the firearm. Now, in this case, with this individual, if there were more days available, they would have found out that, well, in fact, he should not be buying a gun.
Congressman Jim Clyburn has fought for years to get expanded background checks at the congressional level, having passed a bill through the House in 2019 and 2021, but not since Republicans took control of the Congress in 2023.
They found out on the 5th day that it was ineligible, but by that point, it was too late. As a result, those poor souls lost their lives. Let's give the FBI, let's give the authorities enough time to do their jobs. We'll save lives, and we will be the better off for it.
And now from part of our Voices Collected initiative, I want to revisit my conversation with Karen Wright Chisholm, who was a friend of Myra Thompson's. She recalls the day of the shooting and a sad stroke of fate.
That morning of the Emanuel AME shooting, my brother Darryl, which was the youngest of my mother's children, died that morning. So we were all sitting around my dad's family house, and I texted Myra and I told her that Darryl had died, because they knew each other as well, because they had been in class and stuff together. And she responded to me that I have Bible study tonight and I'll stop by after Bible study. So one of my half-sisters, Donna, was at the house with us because my brother passed, but she was a member of Emmanuel, and she would have been at Bible study had my brother not passed that morning. So we were sitting around, talking, watching TV, just having family time. And when the news came across the screen about a shooting at Emanuel AME, everybody's fears just dropped.
Harriet Robinson is an interpreter at McLeod Plantation on James Island, and she spoke of the chilling story she learned and photos she saw of Dylan Roof posing around the plantation a month before the shooting. the tragedy was also deeply personal to her and her family.
We were in the house and she was pulling out pictures, and she basically explained that the young man who committed the massacre had been out here 1 month before. And he had been over to the great burial grounds. He was in front of the big house here, and he was also in front of Transition Row. And so I found that to be very, very intriguing, because I had heard he was downtown. I had heard he had been at the College of Charleston and all over, but I didn't know he was out here. And I wanted to add that story. That's something that stuck out to me. That's something that meant something to me. And I wanted to make sure that that story was always told. I grew up in Mother Emanuel, and out of the 9 victims, my family and I knew 6 of them. My father and Miss Susie Jackson were on the church trustee board at one time. Miss Cynthia Hurd always greeted me when I went into the John L. Dart Library. I remember teaching Reverend Myra Thompson's daughter in Sunday school when I was a teenager. I could always remember seeing Miss Ethel Lance's smile anywhere throughout the church when she ushered. I remember my mother telling me that Reverend Sharonda Singleton had told her to be ready because she was coming to commune her and my father that week, but she never made it because Wednesday happened. Pastor Pinckney was my parents' pastor. At the time of the massacre, I worked in the same school district as his wife, and this is communication that we received the day after. And it was to help her, just remember her, Mrs. Pinckney.
There are many more powerful stories from our Voices Collected initiative that you can watch on youtube.com/South Carolina ETV. And that's it for the podcast, folks. Thanks for listening. As always, you can show us your appreciation by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or a voicemail at 803-563-7169. You can stay up to date with the latest news on scetv.org and southcarolinapublicradio.org, and don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lead is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. Amanda Allen is our intern. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lead, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.